Ish and Joe Budden debate their contracts.
You did not lose. Lose is the word.
There's
A penny.
I did.
But at the end of every single month, there was a plus sign at the end of your expense sheet. Stop playing with me, bro.
My attorney had to be paid for every time a call was made,
And
a
that
letter was made,
email was sent.
and for over the course of 2 years. So that means even when you wasn't responding or people weren't responding, I was paying. I chalk that to be a law. I have somebody who is a potential star player, unsigned for 2 years. I have to put a show together. You think that don't cost?
That's right. On the last episode of the Patreon, Joe Budden and Ish got into a clash over compensation and what is Ish's value. Now, this all happened on the heels of a pod trade conversation where that's how this Patreon starts. But it's important to remember that this segment kind of fell flat because everybody was kind of circle jerking Joe, and people were like, oh, I wouldn't do Joe for Charlemagne. It would have to be Joe for Charlemagne and Rogan. I'm like, are y'all crazy? What the hell is he talking about? Rogan and Charlemagne for Joe is clearly a lopsided trade. Charlemagne and Rogan are a lot more valuable than Joe. What the hell are y'all talking about? Anyway, the biggest takeaway from this was the Charlemagne comments Joe made, which I will do a video about later, and the Ish Joe contract debate. It seems like Ish hasn't signed his contract. Now, everybody knows that they've had a contentious negotiation, even dating back to last time when Ish was getting super sweaty, hot, and heavy when arguing. And now it seems like they're back at it again. And I think Ish is trying to overcharge for what they did to the Cold Crush. I mean, I think that Ish and Ice feel like Joe severely underpaid them when they first got there to save the show after Rory and Maul's exit. So let's kind of get to the crux of what's happening. Joe is mad that Ish hasn't signed his contract and that he had to spend 2 years trying to get Ish re-signed. Now, we also have to zoom out and look at the dynamics of the room. Ian Dunlop, the newest upstart on the Joe Budden podcast, it seems like he signed there, though he barely talks on the main pod, rides for Joe in this debate, and Ice seems to ride with his guy Ish. Now, like I said, apparently what happened is Ish and Ice likely took some cheap fee when they first stepped through the door all those years ago in 2021. Joe probably hit them up and was like, hey, man, I need you to do this pod for me. And at the time, they didn't understand the business of podcasting. But maybe when they started doing more pods, they truly got to see what Joe was making. Hell, even on the last few episodes, I think Ish threw out some $10 million number that Joe Budden may have signed, and that may be, why they feel like they were underpaid. Never mind the relationships that they established with Mandy, who probably is letting them know, you guys, you're getting underpaid. Joe is printing money over there. And I think this is also why Ish didn't want to resign so quickly and likely wanted to get as much money as he could in the renegotiation. Oh man, it's happening. Ish is trying to get the money back that he now realizes he walked out the door all those years back after episode 437. But Joe rebuts that by saying Ish cost him lawyer fees by extending the negotiations. Joe then says Ish on the pod was risky because he didn't have a guaranteed contract and could leave at any moment. But Ish smartly responds by saying the same way he could have left the Joe Budden podcast, Joe could have fired him. Now, I gotta tell you, I'm a bit shocked because Joe used to brag about how having unguaranteed contracts was a flex. I thought unguaranteed contracts was modus operandi for the JBP, but now Joe's doing his, oh my God, it's so tough having people unsigned. I was so stressed out. I didn't know if Ish would walk through that door. I didn't know if Ish would leave. And likely what happened is Joe realized he escaped one prison with Rory and Maul, and Ish could have left at any moment and started his own pod and took in the value from the show. Luckily, we never got there. Now, Joe was really crying again. I mean, he was just crying left and right. And Joe doubles down another time, saying that having Ish unsigned wasn't beneficial. And then Joe says that Ish being unsigned means he had to pay to make things secure. And could this be him hinting that he had to hire more people like Melissa Ford and Flip? Oh, we're getting to it. Is it possible that the only reason Flip and Melissa Ford were on the pod was because Joe didn't feel too secure about Ish staying long term? Anyway, Ish says that Joe was still paying him the lower rate, and he's saying once again that Joe made out like a bandit by not properly compensating Ish for those first 2 years. Then Joe escalates things by saying the pod isn't his only gig, seemingly saying that Ish has other things he does, justifying why he paid Ish the way he did. So Joe is echoing that, this podcast, I allow you guys to make money outside of here. So the lower rate isn't really a big deal to me. Ish makes more money outside of the pod. So why is he demanding he get paid more? Now the rest of the cast starts to get quiet around this time because it's kind of getting serious. I mean, Imani and Ian kind of say some things, and I got to caution. Oh, Ian Dunlop, welcome to the torture chamber. Now you got to watch what you say about Ish, because remember when Flip first got there, he was trying to, get at Ish. He was trying to argue with Ish, and he realized Ish was he's the shot caller there after Joe. Not necessarily because of, what his equity is in the network, but just because he's better at arguing than you. He's smarter than you. He can have a conversation without threatening violence. I'm talking about Flip here, not Ian. And Ian's going to have to ingratiate himself to Ish too, unless Ish leaves. But we will see. And this debate back and forth ends with Ish doubling down that Joe kind of underpaid him for 24 months. Now, let's see. Will Ish resign? Does Ish need to resign on the podcast? I don't know. I mean, I think the podcast has made a lot of additions. Mark Lamont Hill, Ian Dunlop. Also, they made some additions that have backfired, like Jay Wan, who's no longer on the pod. I don't know. Ish is still the beloved figure. Ish is still somebody that really connects with the audience, and his presence leaving will be tough. And especially because Flip is redundant. I mean, the guy is like I don't know. He just repeats the same old thing every episode. That wheelhouse is just so predictable, whereas Ish has range. He can have conversations about certain things. And I don't know if Ian Dunlop is going to be the savior that, we think he is. I think he's just there to kind of get his red panda up, dip like a chip. All right, y'all. That's my video on this subject. But I want to echo that I got to do a Charlamagne and Joe Budden video, because Joe said some pretty crazy stuff about Charlamagne. And for those of you wondering why I didn't cover the pod trade segment, it's because they slow walked that dog, man. They were just there saying some straight up nonsense. Ian asked Parks, who would you trade for the cast of tonight's conversation? I'm like, Parks was like, who the hell are you talking about? What the hell was that about, guy? And like I said, the Rogan and Charlamagne for Joe was the dumbest trade I've ever seen. That's like saying I wouldn't trade Kevin Durant for LeBron James and Shaq. What the hell is he talking about? Kevin Durant is great, but he's not LeBron James and Shaq. Man, this restored the feeling, I gotta tell you. I know what Joe's doing. I see what Joe's doing. We're getting back in that contract bag. We're getting back in that, let's boost the Patreons we lost because we went out in the hallway and we had to leave our studio. The content dipped, but went out in the hallway, the sleepwalking incident. They're trying to get back up there, and we'll see if this works. Pretty soon, you'll start to see guests as well. All right, y'all. Follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. Also tap in with my Patreon. This is Danny from the Stop. Peace.